All right. I'm waiting on Brent. Entirely my fault though, because he just texted me saying link, and I thought I had sent it like a month ago, but apparently I didn't. So he'll be along shortly. Did I send it now? Yes, I did. I don't like not being on time. That's entirely my fault though. That time, in fairness, can't really hold that against him. If I didn't tell him, he was hardly going to guess the unique sequence of numbers and letters that make up the link. He'll be along shortly. Hello, Bruce. Welcome. Oh, he saw it. That's a good sign. Yeah, you can watch it back. I assume he did. Yeah, Bruce is crazy supportive of all the people that do this. It's pretty cool. Be like Bruce. Way past my bedtime. Where are you? Greece. 20 past 10. Hello, sir.
Hello. Let's roll.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Look who's watching the live chat. Mary's watching.
Oh, hey, Mary.
Cyprus, yeah, I thought Greece. What's the relationship with her? I met her in Miami, and she was like, "Oh, I know Brent," and then like she really knows Brent. I thought she was just like, "Oh, I met him once."
No, we've become good friends, and she helps with the Professor Project and Train Your Weakness.
Yeah.
So she's become good friends with my wife and I, and she just like hangs out with us and stuff, but also is like an employee. So
that's cool. Is that? And do I hear Evelyn?
Oh yeah, yeah. She's keeping busy.
Yeah, she seems like good fun. She had a nice time in California.
Yeah, she did. No, she was the star. She was definitely the most liked Fikowski in the building for sure.
It's not hard.
No, pretty low standards. It's like, me or no, it's Evelyn, and then probably like my mom, and then it's like there's just lots of Fikowskis that are better than me. Let's be honest.
Do your parents do they go to your events and stuff still?
Yeah, quite a few of them. Like not all of them, but they like going. So yeah, they come to quite a few. My sisters come to a few, and yeah.
Are they like elitist? Are they like, I'll see you in July? I'm not going to.
Yeah, they came to California. That's it's like July or bust kind of thing. No, they've come to a few of this the regionals and stuff over the years. They just they were always really supportive of my sister and I when we were playing sports, and they just like to watch. So
that's cool. So what age Evelyn's is she? She's just one in like a month and a half, is it?
Yeah.
How's that been?
It's good. Yeah, she's great. She's a little angel. She's sleeps really well and is well behaved and just like pretty clever, and basically no health issues. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, she's how did you get her to sleep? How did you do that?
Yeah, I know. My I mean, I credited a lot to luck, and then the rest is my wife. She's been doing like a lot of research on like sleep training and stuff, and I mean, we kind of did everything we could, but I think some of it's for sure luck, but we definitely you kind of have to force them a bit into a schedule, and so there's like certain nights where you got to let them cry it out, and then they eventually fall, and then it's kind of like that. But if you just constantly, they're upset, and you feed them or you give them milk, or you come in, and then they just, that becomes the routine. And so I can't speak to it. It's it's very much like the wife knows best in that department, and she's really well versed in that area. So I'm like, what's the plan tonight? She's like, we're doing this now. All right. And then so I can't speak to that with any authority, but my wife certainly has done a good job.
Yeah, I'm a real stressor around like naps, sleeps, like timings and stuff. And my wife, she's like the level-headed one of like, look, it'll be fine. Like they're not going to die. They'll just be tired, and they'll just be awake during the night. And I'm like, no, it's like it's 13 minutes past 7. Like we need, I'm just bit of a dick about it. With so before, say, like, this is your first full season with Evelyn knocking around, like, she was kind of, obviously you had the, I guess, the stress of her imminent arrival, or the excitement, whatever way you want to look at it, before, like, around this time last year. But this is your first. You've had a games. You've had an off season. You've had a hell of a lot of travel as well in that time. And then you had, like, open quarterfinals, semifinals, all with her around. Has it changed anything, like, apart from the obvious, apart from, like, maybe you're a bit more tired, or you're having to be more careful around your recovery and stuff? Has it changed, like, your attitude towards training, or your attitude towards, like, I guess, what's your job?
Yeah, I'd say not really. If anything, I would say I smile more often. Like, that's probably the biggest thing. Like, I think she just brings joy day to day to, what my wife and I have going on. And so I think, if nothing else, she's definitely just brought more joy into our house. Yeah, that's really, like, I mean, I could, there's like trade-offs and stuff. I can't really say, like, oh, I've developed some, like, I suppose it'd be kind of, there's like cliches, like, I developed a new perspective, and I work so much harder for her, or, maybe I've, like, released stress on myself because all that matters is that she loves me. Like, I could say all those things, but admittedly, like, none of those would really be true. Like, I like I've always trained really hard, and I feel like, more or less, I've always had a really good perspective on, like, balancing, like, really high performance while still being fairly grounded and trying to stay humble. And, like, at the end of the day, if I just have, like, an absolutely miserable season of competition, like, my life doesn't end. I
Mhm.
mean, like, the people that care about me, like, that doesn't, they just want me to be happy and, be proud and stuff. So it's like, I haven't developed some, like, massive new change in my perspective on things, because I don't think I needed, like, a massive change. But it's been just more or less, it's just been fun. She's just great, and it definitely, just provides, it's just enjoyable. Like, just spending time with her is a lot of fun, and it forces that element of, like, play and family into the day that, wasn't getting forced in at times. So yeah, I mean, that's a very, like, I'm speaking about this very logically. I love her a lot. I'm, I'm, like, talking like a robot, but no, I love her, and, like, my wife and I just, it's strengthened our bond, and we just like spending time with her. She's really cool. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Um, what about the other side of it then? Like, so, they're all, like, potential positive outcomes that you're talking about, but what about, like, not wanting to go and train because there's something happening, or because there's a stressful day, like teething or whatever, or, like, guilt of going in, like, going off and training, saying, oh, I'll be gone for, like, 2 hours or whatever? Like, have you had any of that kind of stuff, or do you think that because you've kind of, like you've said there, you kind of had it compartmentalized almost beforehand, that it was easier?
Yeah, I mean, there's times when there's always been, since always, like, reasons not to train. It's like, oh, I'm, like, really tired, and there's something else I need to get done. Oh, I don't really want to train today, and then I go train. Like,
Yeah.
that's been there for the last 10, 11 years, and it'll be there for forever. Even when I'm not competing, it's like, I'll wake up one day and I'm like, oh, I should really work out. Oh, but there's all these reasons why I don't really feel like it. If you're looking for reasons not to train, you're easily going to find them. But it is hard when I'm, like, inside, and she wants to play, and she's just being really cute, and I'm like, oh, I'd love to just stay in here, and then I go out and train, because it's
Yeah.
like, and at the, like, also, there's this balance between, I think, like, kids will remember what you do long after what you say. And so it's like, if I show, like, dedication to my job, and, like, passion for my craft and my job, like, right now she's too young to understand that, but in time she will, and she'll, hopefully that'll, like, rub off on her in some way. And, it's, for example, it's one thing to say, like, oh, you need to eat healthy, and you need to, look after your body. But if you're constantly, drinking alcohol and having bad foods and never exercising, but you say those things, it's like, it's not going to stick with your kid, right?
Mm.
And it's the same if you, like, oh, I want you to be focused, I want you to have fun, I want you to, work hard towards your goals. But, like, if you don't do that, and you just sit around all the time, it's like, they're not going to do those things, right? So, um, and, I've spoken with, yeah, I mean, and even, I think back to when I was a kid, like, I never felt like I didn't have enough time with, let's say, either one of my parents. My mom stayed at home. Like, I never felt like, oh, I wish my dad was around more. But, like, he worked a 9 to 5 job. He'd sometimes go away for a couple days or a week. And, you'd sometimes have late days or what, but it's like, you have to make a living. So
Mm.
pretty practical about it. But yeah, it doesn't make it easy when she's like a lot of fun and you just want to like play with her and you're like, damn it, I really got to go outside and do like 1,000 burpees and kill myself.
Yeah. Well, she's grateful according to Claire anyway. It's as Evelyn says to
Oh,
me. So
my wife. I don't know if my wife's watching downstairs or something.
or
Maybe
someone's made a catfish account. One or the other. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
During the off season, then, so there's a good bit of stuff to catch up on. I was watching your documentary, the thing that you and Nico did together. Interesting thing that jumped out was that you said that the Burj was one of your favorite events that you've ever done. Like how? Like how?
So there's a little documentary on YouTube, folks. For those of you listening, I did it with Nico, and he's a videographer in the space and photo creator and stuff, and content creator, I guess is the term goes. So it's a little documentary on my competition in Dubai back in December 2022, and so yeah, we climbed up the stairwell of the Burj Khalifa, the largest building in the world, and it was just, it's just so iconic, right? Like, it's just you can't even pay to do that, right? You can't say, hey, I want to. It's like, no, like, you have two options. You either pay to go in an elevator to this floor or to this floor, and we got to climb to like that floor through a stairwell that you're like not allowed to go through, so just that in and of itself, and then to be up there, and yeah, it was just really cool. And like, I grew up, it just reminded me of swimming, where it's just like you're kind of looking at the black line on the bottom of the pool just forever, and that's what it felt like, because you just, the whole stairwell is the exact same. Someone commented, I think, on the video, like, oh, you did this climb through the stairwell, but you didn't show any footage of it. I'm like, oh no, there's footage of it. It's right at this timestamp, and it looks like that for 30 minutes. Like, that's all there's nothing else to see. It's not some like fancy stairwell and like with a view every 3 stories. It's like, no, it's just a white like stairwell from like a fire escape stairwell. That's it, pal. There's nothing else to see.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
it
I just
was
realized
a
I'm not
yeah.
subscribed. I'm now subscribed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. It's like on the during semifinals, Chase was doing, the podcast like coverage, and like someone like kept commenting saying, please tell us where they are in the event, or where people are in the event. And I was in the live chat. I was like, they're on the fucking treadmills. Like, what do you want them to say? Like, they're all on treadmills and they're all running for another easily 3 minutes. Like, like, what do you want them to say to you? But yeah, no, it's funny. People get kind of hung up on stuff. What you did more. Maybe this isn't accurate, but to my mind, you did more off-season competitions this season than other years. Would that be
Yeah.
accurate? Was
Yeah,
that
that's
a
very accurate.
deliberate choice? Were you like, all right? Because I feel like other years you used to go to Madison and then kind of like close yourself off and like lock the door and just get to work and then come back out when it was time, like a
Yep.
bear or something.
Yeah, like Dracula.
Yeah, why the change this year?
You know, I don't really know if I could put my finger on it. Just to get out there and compete, have a good time. Like, I can't say uh, there's no real good reason for it. I don't think there's a. Some people do it one way, some people do it the other way. Like, I think, you look back at like a Josh Bridges, and he just did open regionals games. Like, I don't think he ever did any off-season events. Pat Vellner is someone who's done a lot of off-season events throughout the last like 6-7 years of him being to the games. Fraser didn't really do many, and there's a lot of ways to slice it. I think for me this year, it was like I didn't have a great CrossFit Games in 2022, and changed up my training quite a bit after that, made some adjustments, and then I don't know, we, like, my wife and I wanted to go on a trip. That was part of it, and so we were able to kind of make the Egypt comp and the Dubai comp, kind of spin that together into a vacation, while Evelyn still flies for free. Quite frankly, before she's 2 years old, you fly for free with the toddler. And yeah, just kind of like just put myself out there, have some fun, and didn't try to like do a massive like periodization for those and have like some huge taper and some big break after. Just sort of trained through them to a certain extent. Like, still didn't go in like tired or anything, but yeah, just no like strategic reason other than just like, what, like, let's compete a bit more, and it seems to be working. Like, I didn't feel burnt out. Really, the only reason you don't want to do it is you don't want to feel burnt out by the time like semis rolls around. and you don't want it to take away from like making real progress in your training. Because if you're just kind of always preparing for a comp, sometimes you don't put in the work, doing like strict gymnastics, or like, progressions in weightlifting, or like a bunch of steady state aerobic stuff. Like if you're just going like high intensity, fast, hard, heavy kipping for these competitions, because that's kind of what you need to do leading up to them. Then if you're just doing that every month, then it's like, well, where's the like real kind of like base building? But I feel like I was able to do all that base building and still compete well, and so worked out.
I think this is in reference to you getting your free flights. Not only is he a professor, but he's an economist.
Yeah, yeah. So
um,
yeah.
with the last season, then, so you were disappointed in August after the games are over, and then you say that you changed your training quite a lot. So like directly after the games, do you just like try not to think? Do you try to immediately purge yourself of all the thoughts and information you have, like get everything down on paper or to your coach or whatever, like clear that way? Or do you like not think or talk about it for a couple of weeks, like totally switch off and then come back to it?
Yeah, I have to start purging immediately, or it'll just fester. It's not something I can like shake off and put to the side. It's, like, I mean, I've had CrossFit games and competitions where like my coaches have never lived in the same place as me. And so often, I'll finish a competition, let's say on a Sunday, and I'll be up until, midnight or 1 a.m., like in person talking with the coach, having like, pizza or whatever. And we're just like talking about training,
Yeah.
talking about every event, talking about training. Like that's happened at multiple competitions where, we're immediately talking about like, okay, we tried this for handstand push-ups and like, it didn't seem to really work. So, we need to try something else. Like what other ways can you attack the same problem? Or, you find something that works and you're like, hey, we're just going to double down on it. We're going to do the same thing. And then also, it could be things like, you go to the CrossFit Games in 2022 and you finish, you're like, damn, like this was a very different programmed competition. There's all these new movements. How are we going to, you might need to bring someone in, like bring in a gymnastics coach or something. Cause it's like, damn, we were totally kind of blindsided by some of those things, was just pretty unprepared. So we need to like just start from scratch, as opposed to, like a basic problem of like, my legs aren't strong enough. Is like, well, that's something I've been dealing with forever. So it's, tried a bunch of things. But yeah, I immediately am like thinking about that stuff. And cause it just, even after a good competition, like this year, the couple days after, I was having a tough time sleeping because I'm just like thinking of that stuff and PFA stuff, but just thinking about how I can improve immediately.
Do you have like is there employees for PFA? No. Is it just like all volunteer based?
It's volunteer based. I think in time it will be necessary. If things go well, it will be necessary to get some form of to get money coming in so we can pay people to do good work. Good people need to get paid, right? You can't expect volunteers to do great work forever. But right now it is volunteer based. In order to take, whether it's like donations or some sort of like dues, we need to have a much better defined sort of like mission statement, goals, and steps, so that when people are donating, they know exactly what they're getting out of it, and what we're planning to do, and then we can execute on those things. And creating that vision, we want to do that first, and that just takes a bit of time, more time than I'd like. But it's like, today I probably sent, I don't know, 30 emails already. And then on top of that, I'm like trying to, I mean, we can go through it, but I'm like trying to like build a strategy on like, okay, what are the steps, how do we make this sport better? And then what does that like functionally look like to make that happen? So,
yeah, I think I want to dive into that. So, we'll come back. I want to come back to your off-season stuff, but just while it's fresh there. So the semi-finals, I suppose, like from when I was in Berlin and I was talking to a few people who had been to more than one of the semi-finals. So like I was talking to O'Keefe and I was talking to Jake and a few others that had been to the ones in America as well. And they were kind of saying that like week one, the standards were given or the information was given to people. And then week two, the standards and information was given, but it was like 10 times more specific and clearer and like And then he was like, and then in Europe, it was like real, like military grade instruction that it was like, as it went on, it was getting more and more refined each week. Is it basically your hope then that like next time, like next year, whatever, that like week 1 will be at the stage that week 3 was at, and week 3 will be even better than week 3 was this year? Is it basically just, is it
Yeah,
just that clarity?
that's a huge part of it, right? And so when you described week 1, like that's the CrossFit Games, right? And
Yeah.
that's a huge problem because the CrossFit Games really matters, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, man, there's just so many things, right? And I think for the longest time, you know, we're kind of hoping for things to get better on their own, and they're just not. You know, things just, and then even the things that we have done, the PFA, to try to, you know, lend free advice to CrossFit Inc. in our calls, some of it's stuck and some of it hasn't. And, you know, some of the issues you're seeing in week 1 and week 2 and week 3 are, you know, we provided specific solutions to those things with like specific instructions on how to solve them. And it's like, okay, thanks guys, you know, we'll look into that. And then they didn't use it. And then there's this kind of like uproar of like, oh, that's frustrating.
Can you give an example of like one of the things that you noticed, tried to fix, and was ignored?
Yeah, like, well, the minimum work requirements, right? So, you know, we provided potential, like, so what happened to Alex Caron? You know, we provided like a detailed description on, you know, our opinion, and this is the opinion of the board of directors, on like minimum work requirements. Basically, they shouldn't exist. But if they do exist, they shouldn't exist to kick someone out of a competition. Instead, you know, either give them 0 points, give them negative 100 points, or don't have them at all. Yeah. And so my reasoning for that is, like, historically what happens with a minimum work requirement is someone usually is getting kicked out because they just can't do a thing. Examples that come to mind would be strict ring muscle ups in Nate in the 2016 regional, or strict handstand push-ups in a weight vest 2017 regional, or rope traverses in the obstacle course in a weight vest in 2018. And so if those are minimum work requirements, basically like, hey, if you can't do that, get the hell out. We've never done those things again.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a bizarre thing where you're like, you're creating a qualification process to get the best athletes we have available to come to your competition. They're paying their travel, they're paying their fee to compete. And then one of the first events of the competition, you have a movement that's never been done before. And you're saying, if you can't do it, get the hell out. And then they can't do it, get the hell out. And then you're never doing it again for the next 5, 6, 7 years. You're like, okay, so why was it so important that you could do that, this new thing? And who gets to decide what those things are, right? Like, I mean, maybe it's reasonable to say, hey, if you can't do 5 burpees, get the hell out. It's like, all right, sure. But when does that end? Like 5 burpees in a vest or 5 burpees over a box? Well, how high is the box? Like, at a certain point, you're going to get the best people possible to your event, and you're going to ask them to do something, and some of them just can't do it. I mean, I know a girl that qualified for semis, fair and square, really good movement quality. She did all singles in the muscle ups in workout number 1 in quarters, right? And so is that person going to be able to do a ring muscle up in a backpack? Like, maybe not. And is that grounds to kick them out of the competition? I'd say no. And so we provided those solutions. I felt we displayed it in a very logical and sensible fashion, but you know, it just didn't resonate enough for them to like create a standard procedure. And then, you know, you have a situation like with Caron, where kind of shooting from the hip a bit, and, you know, adjusting how they typically do their injury medical review of an athlete, because they typically do a very good job of, you know, allowing the medical team to do the review and to assess the situation and give the appropriate you know, course of action to the athlete, to the event organizer, and so on. And I mean, I've had that experience myself where like the medical team is amazing, and even CrossFit Games, like, they are looking out for the athlete's safety. Like, a lot of times, to be frank, like, from what I've experienced, this is a bit anecdotal, but it's often the CrossFit Games, some of the people on the team, they're like, hey, we don't want you to get hurt. Like, if you're dealing with an injury, you know, you should pull out, you should quit. They don't want you to be hurt. And then it's often the medical team that goes, well, yeah, they're a bit banged up, but like it's their call and they're fine. Or it's
Yeah.
like, hey, this muscle is torn completely. Like it's going to hurt, but it's not going to get any worse. If they want to keep doing it, they can do it. Like that's usually that's some of the
Yeah.
anecdotal situations, right? And and then even I don't know, how aware were you of the weight belt situation in
Yeah.
like the Tola thing? So PFA wrote recommendations, like this all on our website, but we wrote recommendations for the rule book to add the attire. This was in December 2021. They added it for January 2022. So there's a section of the rule book that says this is how big your weight belt can be. This is the type of grips you can use. These are the types of knee sleeves and so on. So in the 2022 season at semis, some of those, none of those were officially run by CrossFit, but they had the kind of sanctioned event organizers. These rules existed, but they weren't being applied. Right, there was no system in place for the upkeep and the assurance that these rules were being followed by the athletes. How big is your weight belt? How thick are your knee sleeves? So then we created a PDF, like a series of images. We gave them to CrossFit. We emailed it to them and said, hey, you can use this. You can print it out. You can brand it if you want. And it has sort of like a red square and a green square, a red square and a green square. Like, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. You can wear these things. I'm like, you can print these out. You can give it to the head judge. You can print them in the warm-up area, slap them on the wall so athletes can kind of have a look and be like, okay. And then before you take the floor, someone's checking. We gave that to them before the games in 2022. They didn't use it. We gave it to them, I think, 5 weeks before the 2023 semis this year. They didn't use it. And then first week, they have this problem. It's like, hey, we're giving you a solution to enforce a rule that you have in your rule book, like an easy, streamlined solution. And all it takes is just ensuring that, hey, print 4 of these up, put them on the walls, give it to the head judge, give it to the director of athlete control, who kind of briefs you, puts your chips on your ankle before you take the floor. And they just kind of check, okay, can I see your grips? Yeah. And then they'll get used to it. They'll kind of get the flow. Athletes will get the flow and it'll be fine. But they didn't do that. And then you have these problems. So, we're trying to, what we've been doing is I'm proud of what we've done. And I think we've approached it in the appropriate way, but we need to, and we are going to take further steps to try and make sure things like this, the standardization of fairness and safety, we have to push a little harder and make sure that these things start happening.
I don't want you to burn bridges, don't answer this if you don't want to. But is it like a control thing? Is it like that they don't like being told what to do? Is it because you're a competing athlete? Is it because, what do you think the reason is that there's a reluctance to just say, hey, this guy is actually making good points, let's instigate them? Is it is it just that they don't like when other people say you should do this, and then they have to say, oh yeah, you're right, we should do this?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want this to come off super combative. I'm going to have a call with them post semis. We're sending out surveys to athletes. We're going to compile that, talk to them, and they're really receptive on some things, right? And they have made great improvements in some things we have suggested, improving the size of the warm-up area at the games so the coaches can come to the North Park, which is like the turf area. And so there's they had to work for that. That was something that was a change in their systems that they created that, created a better environment for the athletes. They've done a bunch of great things. There's just certain things they're just still lagging on. And so it could be, I think part of it's a question of resources, right? Where they're busy, they have a pretty small team and they're running these big events. And so it's hey, we need to make sure the bleachers are there. We got to make sure we got the cameras there. We got to lay out the floor. We got to finalize these workouts. We got to standardize these workouts. We got to get the sponsors. We got to get the branding and the graphics. So all these things are happening. And then, the standardization of movements, I think sometimes it's a little bit of the Wild West. We'll figure it out that morning. It's a pistol. It'll be fine. We've done that before, but there's not, and I mean, I think in my personal opinion, there's a lot of things aren't written down, and so, you have a standard for a movement, and there's no review of well, did that standard work? Did it not? And can we make it better? Because, they had and this is kind of a deep dive, but, in 2017, we had a workout in the open that was dumbbell cleans to the shoulder. And the standard there was really good. It said, lockout is defined as hips and knees locked, standing tall. And then it said something about I could pull it up, but it's a certain half of the dumbbell passes the center of the body, so it's this is lockout. Like, here, no good. It just said, it was one sentence and it just said like, it needs to get to this point. There's like one or two criteria. It's like, all right, that is defined as lockout. And then in the 2021 quarters, we had dumbbell hang cleans, and the lockout was just said dumbbells to shoulder.
Yeah.
And so people were just like slamming it to their chest or the front of their delts, which isn't really like, that's not really good, but they got away with it because it's like, that's what the standard said. And so it's stuff like that. It's the same with Scott Panchik rolling his ankle on and hurting his knee, 2021 semis with the rope. It's like, hey, there was a time, I think it was 2013 or 14, where people were rolling their ankles with ropes, but there wasn't something written down saying, hey, moving forward, we got to cut these ropes at this height every single time we do rope climbs. Full stop, end of story, no exceptions. And that just kind of got lost. And then 6-7 years later, you're back to the same thing. And now you're going to see competitions cut the ropes for a year or two, and then they'll stop because they just kind of just gets lost to history, and then it'll happen again. And it's just like this yo-yo. And so, yeah, why does it happen? I mean, I think it's just, doesn't really matter why. It's more just like moving forward, just got to keep pounding away and keep creating, good resources for the competition to use, and then work in better ways to convince them, And it's not just CrossFit Inc. It's other competitions as well.
I feel bad, like that's supposed to be fund, but Mary obviously doesn't know that I get that money, that you don't get that money. So keep sending it, Mary. That's cool. One of the other things, I don't know if you had a chance to catch up, but in Europe, like one of the issues that was raised up, John Singleton brought it up of the treadmill, Jacqueline's treadmill in lane 8, and well, a lot of people's treadmill in lane 8. And I'm still kind of looking into it, but there was definitely an issue with BK's treadmill. I just don't know what it was, where a head judge was called over, another head judge was called over. There's a lot of talking microphones and shit going on, but I still haven't found out what the actual problem was. And he actually did quite well in that event anyway. But with that kind of stuff, where the answer that's given is like, well, there's a certain standard deviation that's acceptable, like, isn't that like, that's kind of like the unknown unknowable, like it's kind of that answer, isn't it, where it's like, well, what is the standard deviation that's acceptable and why is it that big? Like, because I mean, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not particularly good at like pacing or like what paces should be, but when you see a treadmill, when you hear the statistic that you were more likely to finish in the bottom 3 in that lane and then in another lane you were more likely to finish in the top 3, it can't just be down to the fact that there was faster runners in that lane in every heat and there was slower runners in that lane in every heat. So, and even the fact that all the girls and guys that were on it were like, yeah, something felt off. But then I suppose there is that thing of like, well, how are they asked the question? Was it like, hey, you ran really shit, was there something wrong with your treadmill? It's like, yeah, there was something wrong with it. But when you hear that kind of stuff, and then someone brought up here, Phil brought up here that the max load on the Rogue website is 4 blue plates. But men were asked to do 5 blue plates, and then he's saying that if you go into the gear specifics, it says like 4. When you hear stuff like that, is that funny because it's like pissing you off and it's frustrating, or is it like,
it's pissing me off and it's so? I mean, let me grab my little sheet here, some stuff I was scribbling down. So like safety and fairness, right? Those are kind of the two big high level things that we're trying to improve. And so fairness, we can define as like, we want to make sure everyone in every lane is experiencing the same thing, and has the same opportunity to get, 100 points essentially in every individual workout. So when you look at like what are the things that can make something unfair? So when I look at the runners, and I didn't realize that the runners had variance. Like, if you'd asked me a week or two ago, I'd be like, I don't know, like I'd assume they're calibrated. Like, I just don't know. And now I'm realizing they're not. Like, so the Concept 2 machines, the ski erg, the bike erg, and the rower, like they're calibrated, right? There's a drag factor and it adjusts based on, I don't know exactly how it works, but they're consistent, right? And maybe not like perfectly consistent, but pretty consistent. The assault bike, the echo bike, and the assault runner, they are a series of gears and pulleys, or not pulleys, just gears and freaking chains and stuff. And every revolution is a revolution. That's it, right? There's no like calibration that goes into those machines. And so, for example, like if I went to my assault bike outside, and I drilled a bunch of holes in the fan blades, I could just set a world record. Or if I lubed up the chains, tighten them up, I'd set a world record. And the same would go for the Echo Bike. I could go in, I could twist all the fan blades or drill holes in them, and then I just set a world record because it's just fan go burr. And every time it goes around once, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you multiply that to get the watts, you multiply that to get your kilometers per hour. And I'm pretty sure it's the same on the runner, right? It's just every time it goes around, that's however many meters they say it is, which let's say it's like 2 meters. So every time it goes around, it's 2, 4, 6, 8. And so depending on how well that machine is maintained and how tight it is, and the lubrication of whatever, it's like some are going to be easier, some are going to be harder. So in order for something like that to be fair, there needs to be a method that you can test and find the differences between the machines, and then a method to then adjust those machines so that they are closer together. You obviously want that deviation to be 0 or really close to 0, because with a barbell, it's 0, right? It would be unacceptable if you're like, hey, here's a pile of rocks and like bring them over here. How much do they weigh? Don't know, but it looks the same. They all fit in that bucket. They're all about the same size. Like, come on, just do it. And the sled's the same, right? We've been dealing with friction-based sleds as an issue for years. And I thought we solved it when we brought out the Tumbler in 2018. It's like, sweet, this isn't friction-based, right? It's the sand and the big oil drum essentially. And like that thing was freaking hard. And I'm like, great, we can pull this, we can push this, like, end of story. But we keep pulling and pushing sleds on, whether it be pavement or grass or artificial grass or rubber. And guess what? There's always issues because, friction changes depending on like really small variables that you quite frankly can't control. Whether there's a bit of chalk or spit or water or humidity, or the sun's beating down on one area of the course, or the grass is sloped in a certain direction. It's like, it's just friction is, finicky. And it's like, as athletes, you want this to be as close to 0 as possible. And another example of fairness would be the 2022 CrossFit Games, where there were, 4 or 5 workouts where athletes didn't cover the same distance. And it's like, we need to kind of cover the same distance if we want to know who's better, don't we? Like, that seems pretty imperative. So if you're getting athletes to cover a different amount of distance in a workout, how can we compare times? Like, that doesn't really seem fair, does it? And so, these sort of things need to be buttoned up.
But even like the snatch event, like I actually hadn't thought about it. But then one of my friends, and it's like, it is minimal, but like you say, it's not the same distance, was like in Europe anyway, the athletes started under the rig in a straight line. They ran to 2 rows of bars. So some were closer to the rig, some were further away. And then they're on to their runner. And you get that thing of like, whoever's going to the first bar then has to cover the extra distance to get to the runner. And whoever's going to second bar then has initial longer distance and then a shorter distance. But like, those things all have to be considered. And then there was another event where I think, was it Linda, where everyone started in the same row.
Now, I'm personally, like, again, this is something that, things like this I'd like to take a vote on. Those 2 specific things that you're listing, I'm okay with those. Those are small transition distances that total the same total distance when the workout's finished, and they're there for safety, right? Like, the specific reason those exist is so that athletes aren't too close together, and they're there for safety. So I'm all for that. But there are instances of workouts where when you finish the workout, one athlete has traveled further than the other. And, the solution to that is very simple. And you can have the barbell staggered, because sometimes you have to. You don't want 5 men per heat. You want 10. And if you want 10 and you want barbells, you got to stagger them. It's just kind of the reality. But you still need to make sure they cover the same distance. And you can do that with an out and back, which, has been done. But then at the games, there were 4 or 5 instances where that wasn't done, where the equipment was staggered, but then there was no out and back portion, so someone was continually traveling more distance every single time, which is unfair, right? By definition.
Yeah, I think like my point is that, like, if they've put the thought into it for that, of like, oh well, they're closer, then they can surely put the same thought into just every workout. And then, like, if they can do it for a safety concern, they can do it for, a fairness concern.
And so for those listening, if you're like, oh, what are those ones? The staggered barbells in the deadlift for the back 9, the jerk blocks in the shuttle to overhead, the set of chest to bars for the bike workout, where you would run in and do a set of chest to bars, run out somewhere a little further away. That was very minimal, but it's easy just to finish that, run to the center of the field, touch a line, and come back. The worst one, which didn't end up happening, was the alpaca. The rope climbs were going to be staggered. And so I think it was like a first come, first serve basis to the rope. And so if you got there first, you take the rope that was closest. And if you got there later, you would go to the rope that was like, I don't even know, 15, 20 feet further. And if you did that every single time, you're covering 60 feet extra. When again, you could have the rule could have just been like, hey, first come, first serve, take a rope. And then once you have done the rope, you must go to kind of like the end of the stadium, touch a line, and come back. Those are the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, you're such a CrossFit nerd. I love it. It's like you're just pulling all these dates and shit out of your head. Like,
yeah, it's all up here.
Yeah, you've got like a massive whiteboard in front of you that you're looking at. That's all. You're just cheating.
No, just a dirty kitchen and my calendar.
We've got the same lights in our kitchen. That's funny.
Cool.
Yeah. So the aim then for the PFA. So like, are you hoping that? Because I saw you guys did like a brief in before Pasadena semifinals. Is that something that you're hoping that other people will take the initiative and do? Like, because obviously you guys can do that when you're there, but then if you're not in like Asia or whatever, like you're not going to fly over to Busan to do like a briefing or whatever. Are you hoping that is the aim to have like delegates or whatever that will go to each one and do it?
Yeah, so we have a board of directors. We pretty much have a member of a board of directors in every continent. We were able to have a meeting in Pasadena, in South America with Victoria Campos, and in Australia with Royce Dunn. We had them filmed. We're going to work on kind of piecing them together and releasing what we talked about online here as soon as possible. We attempted to get a meeting going in North America East and Europe and Africa, and they just fell through, just logistic concerns, and they just didn't work out. But it was kind of like, hey, we're gonna try, right, first year, and then we're gonna have a meeting at the games this year. So we're having a meeting on Monday, August 7th in the morning, and we're gonna have more kind of details coming out on that, and already started inviting athletes and coaches and some agents and stuff, and just trying to get everyone together in a room and like vote on some stuff, right, and like clarify and get some concise data on like, hey, this is what we want. It's always hard because I think a lot of times, competition happens, something happens that's frustrating, and people voice their concerns. Sometimes it's just me, sometimes it's John Singleton, and then it kind of gets a little bit of buzz. Some people say that's important, you're pointing that out, other people make excuses for it, and then it kind of dies down, and then we go back to our lives. So we need to do something proactive where we write down, hey, these are things that have been problems in the past, and these are concrete things that we expect as athletes in the sport. When we go to a competition, like these are non-negotiables, and we need to vote on those things and clarify those things so we have it going into a competition. So competitions, not just CrossFit Inc., but any event you go to, whether it's Wadapalooza or whatever, the Gatorade Classic or something, whatever competition you go to, you start to develop these set of things that the best athletes are agreeing are important for safety and fairness. Because it's easy to be reactionary and say, oh, that's common sense, but like common sense isn't that common, and like common knowledge. Well, of course, everyone knows that, name a thing. You're like, yeah, but there's a lot of things, right? There's a lot of things that go on in our sport, and so trying to get the athletes and the coaches that have been at it the longest to kind of, brainstorm and get together and really define what those things are and write them down. And then, got some ways we're going to convince competitions to listen. So.
And say like with the Jacqueline thing and the issues that John raised, do you like take that and go, are you like an intermediary, or do you just advise like, oh, well, you should probably talk to this person and ask this question or whatever? Or like, what's the role
like
there?
In real time?
Yeah, like say, well, even say now, like now that it's, I guess in real time, he's talking to the head judge and that kind of stuff. But even like say now in the aftermath.
Yeah, like real time, I don't have the PFA doesn't have the personnel to.
Yeah.
Whoa, that is a huge spider. Oh, that's a big fella. Sorry, buddy. Nothing personal. It's just my house. Just
That
see
was
the
that sound.
shot.
That sound was you carefully releasing it out the window.
Yeah. What was I gonna say?
About
Yeah,
advice,
real
yeah.
time right now. We don't have the, we're not like we're not a lawyer. You know what I mean? Like right now, it's basically, you go to the competition organizer and they have appeals process. You plead your case and you see what happens. Ideally, we can improve the appeals process. There's a variety of ways to do that, and that's on the list of fairness. But like before that, you want to have a checklist of like, this is what we want, and then hopefully the appeals are much lower, right? And so we're seeing clarity now from CrossFit on, they're releasing, which is great. Hey, these are the appeals at our semis. I think it was 65 appeals at North America East and 35 were granted. And so like it's great that they're showing that, and like that's really good. I want it to get to 2 appeals. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
want it to be even less. And I'm sure the appeals would be way higher if you were allowed to appeal a no rep, right? It'd be 5 times that. Which is fine.
Stop the clock. It's like,
Yeah. And so then, but in the aftermath, like, so there's the blue sky scenario where ideally I'd like things to progress to in solving, an issue like that. And then there's where we are now. So where we are now is, we're going to have a call with CrossFit. We're going to discuss anything and everything that we can regarding the semis and give suggestions. And then it's up to them to kind of determine, what they do with those suggestions. And then maybe blue sky is, we just have a little more pull, right? And if we have more and more support from athletes, and coaches and so on, that we can be more convincing and create more of a partnership. And it's not about like, threatening things, but it's like there's ways we can be better intertwined to help CrossFit reach their goals, which is, to make more money and sell more tickets and get more people taking their level 1 and so on. And if we can help them reach those goals, then they can help us, create the sport we want to be competing in.
Hmm. If you ever need any help in it, I can write emails. That's about all I can do, but I can do that. One of the things, just when we were talking about sleds there, I saw you were talking to Christine and she did a post on Castro's page, and you kind of referenced it as well about you going to failure on your sled in training, like going to extremes of, well, what happens if it's this weight? What happens? Because there was obviously a bit of an unknown about it. And you went to like, what happens if I can't move it? Like, how often do you only do that if it's something that's a genuine unknown? Like, because that was very vague. But like, would you do that on like, what happens if I rip my hand? Like, what happens if I can't hold the bar the way I know? Like, where do you draw the line of like insanity to, like clever planning?
Yeah, no, that was that particular, I gave her that soundbite and it was very true, but I knew that's very like CrossFit, like, oh, I went to failure. And then I knew what my body was. I knew people would eat that up. And so it was a little like, I'll just say it. But it was, I mean, it's not something I just do all the time. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do wall balls until I can't, I'm going to do a 200-pound wall ball. It's like, I'm not doing that in every movement. I don't think you need to like, oh, if my hand, it's like, oh, great, my hand tore. Now I'm going to do every movement and see what it feels like with a big hole in my hand. I'm like, no, I'm going to look after it until it heals, right? Like
Yeah.
it's an injury, so I need to deal with it appropriately. Yeah, I think there's just specific things. Like I think sleds are a good example. Pushing, pulling, dragging. Where I think there's some video of Camille LeBlanc-Bazinet training for the games. She was getting really frustrated by a sled, and I think she was there with her husband, Dave Lipson, and he's like, hey, like, figure this out, because like there's times at the games where you're pushing a sled and the thing won't move. It's like, so just, like obviously our intended stimulus of this was like kind of a sprint workout, and it's turning into this absolute grind, but like there's benefit to that as well. So yeah, it's not something you like actively are trying to add into your training all the time, but it's it has a time and a place. And for something that's kind of, when I saw the first week, I'm like, holy smokes, people are like really struggling with this, and in my training I just wasn't really. So I'm like, I need to put more weight on this to make sure I know what's going to happen if I start to struggle like these people seem to be, which I didn't. But no, turns out it was
Flex.
easy. No,
Yeah.
it was hard, man. Like I realized I made it look easy and I won the workout, but man, I'm like, this is very, very hard. And I felt like I was going very slow and it was fast enough to win. But yeah.
That workout, a lot of people were kind of saying like, "Oh, this is Brent written all over it," and like that. Before a workout like that, like I assume you see a workout on paper and think like, "Oh, I bet people think I'm going to do well at this one." Is that like, would you rather go into a workout being like, "I bet people think I'm going to suck at this," and then surprising them, or is it like, is it a kind of shitty kind of pressure when it's like, if you don't win it, it's a disappointment, or like you fail somehow, like it kind of a weird expectation?
Yeah, no, it's I just started watching the television series Succession.
Oh yeah, I do.
And
Yeah.
oh man, it's so good. I am in love. It is like it's so good. And but so there's this one line that I think it might have been episode 1 that the Logan Roy, who's this old grizzled businessman, like hard as, and he goes his son's telling him like, oh, the world's changing, and we got to invest in digital, and he's like more about like newspapers and old school, and he goes, back in the 80s, people told me to do this, and I didn't listen to them. I did that, and it worked. And back in the 90s, people were saying, oh, this is all the, and then I did this. And he's like, now in hindsight, it seems so freaking obvious, but it wasn't, And I think sometimes when people are, there's this expectation of like, oh, Brent will win this. And then when I do, let's say, as happened with the sled, it's like, oh, of course. I'm like, yeah, in hindsight, now that it's on the page and the book, that chapter has been closed, it seems so obvious that like, oh, of course, it's like, of course he'd win that workout. Like, man, a lot went into that. There's like a lot of I was looking at videos, like figuring out my splits. I was doing stuff with my heart rate and training. I was like researching sled technique stuff. I was doing all these little things. And then when it happens, it's like, oh, of course he won it. Like, it's not even hard for him. Like, it looks so easy. I'm like, yeah. It's like, if you knew what went into the mastery, you wouldn't think it was so special. I think that's a Da Vinci quote. But so yeah, there's definitely that kind of pressure, and I'm not one to go into a workout making bold claims about like, I'm going to win this. Like, it just doesn't. I just don't believe in that kind of stuff. I'd probably have more fans if I made bolder claims about my future. But I just don't believe in it. So I could be like, oh, I'm going to win the games this year. I'm like, well, yeah, like you know what I mean? I feel great. My training's going so good. I'm going to win. Like, yeah, like, everyone thinks that's in the top 30. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I think there is a pressure, but I don't really let it get to me, because it's like, if it doesn't work out, or it does, people are going to think a certain way anyway, and then they're going to forget about the pressure that was put on before it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's only when it's done. And I feel like one of my pet peeves in this sport is people that make bold claims about stuff and then no one holds them to it after, right? It's like no one keeps the receipts in this sport because it's so small. It's like someone needs to be keeping receipts and screenshots and video recordings of all the bold claims that coaches and athletes make about themselves and then don't come true or come even close to true, and just call them out on it, because it's like, because if you're gonna reward them, you don't deserve the applause if you're not ready for the boos and the hiss. And so, if you're going to reward someone for like, oh, he called his shot, then it's like, you better also be ready to like, hang them out to dry if they called their shot and we're like just so wrong.
Yeah. He shit the bed.
Yeah, it's a two-way street, right? And like, so it's pretty easy to make a bunch of bold claims and then they don't come true, and you just like forget about them. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I started doing that with like analysts, where if someone says something that I'm like, oh, that's pretty outlandish, I'll screenshot the message. and I was like, I'm going to send them this in like August when they're wrong. Because I was like, I mean, if it's a bold claim, if that turns out to be dumb, I'm definitely reminding them of it. And I don't want the hearsay. I don't want, well, remember you said it. I just want to be like, here is the evidence of you saying,
Yes. And I mean, the only other sport, I follow a little bit of strongman, a little bit the NBA, and like the NBA and the analysts, like, people get held to their stuff there. Like, there's montages of the analysts making bold and terrible predictions. There's montages of players making bold predictions and they're being wrong. Like, they keep the receipts in like the bigger sports for sure. And so I kind of wish we do a little bit more of that. It might keep people a little more honest, but
yeah, well, we can start it. Training think tank thing, you went down there, you were down in Georgia, which again, well, maybe you have and just been quiet about it, but I don't think I've ever seen you do that either, where you went and like visited and trained for a prolonged period of time. You were training with your own coach in think tanks setup or
Yeah.
whatever. Was that another case of like, let's do something different and see what shakes out kind of thing?
Yeah, it was just like, hey, let's go down there and see what they have going on, and maybe learn from them, maybe give them some like takeaways on what I'm doing. And yeah, I went there with my coach, David Spur, only training, and but wanted to go there and just like, yeah, I've always got along really well with Max Elhag and Elhaj and Travis Mayer and that
I'm
crew.
glad
So
you corrected that, because I was like, I've been saying his name wrong for years.
I'm pretty sure it's Elhaj. It's
Yeah.
very Canadian or American of me to like mispronounce a name that's not just like Smith or
Yeah,
Bruce.
it's Max. It's Max. Just call him Max, and it's fine.
Yeah. I know in Europe when they're announcing like in CrossFit and stuff, you've got a lot of names there that are much prettier than the North American names. And I mean, even
some pretty ugly names there as well, to be fair.
Well, yeah, I didn't, that's on you. That's not on me.
That's not for me to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get athletes to band together, not make fun of their names.
Not you guys. Your name is ugly. You're not in. We don't want.
We don't want ugly name people.
Yeah. 2 syllables max. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? What is it about Max then and the setup there that you like? Also, I thought it was very funny how quick you. Like, I don't know if you felt you had to do this, but how quickly you explained, I was at training thing with my coach, like that you like immediately clarified before any rumors started.
That was intentional. My coach and I talked about that when we were like, oh, we should go. And I just like what they have going on. I think that they approach things like similar enough to how we do things that there would be some common ground we could find. Whereas I think there's other training camps that just have like a very different mentality on training, which is fine. Like they produce like great athletes as well and good people. But if you just have a very different philosophy on training, it's just going to be like, you're not going to get anything from each other. Right. Quite frankly. And so I just kind of like how they do things. And so, we were able to share a few things and learn some stuff, and nothing like groundbreaking, which is in a way good as well. Like on the one hand, you'd love to go there and be like, oh man, like they're doing things. Oh man, they have this new way to train pull-ups. Like I've never seen that. And then you change everything, or you go and you're like, like we're kind of doing everything more or less right. Like a couple new things to think about. And it was more of that. It was like, oh no, we know what we're doing here. Which is also good. I don't know which one's better or worse, but
you don't want to go there and be like, oh fuck, we've wasted like 2 years.
Oh man, trust me, I've done that. Like I wish, I think it's inevitable in life in general, but definitely in a sport this young, it's like, man, if I knew 10 years ago what I know now on what works and what doesn't work, in my opinion, at least for me in training, I feel like I'd be, I'd have more medals in my cabinet, but that's where they are anyway. They're just in a box somewhere, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, but I think that's the inevitability of sport, and then I'll pass that down to someone else, and then they'll forget it, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
That's sport.
God, that's kind of depressing end to that.
We're all just dying. We're just
waiting to die.
I think in in any sport, you're just passing knowledge and information down to the next generation, but some of it is like, a lot of it is just mistakes that you kind of have to, like, you don't really know what overtraining is until it's happened to you a few times. You're like, oh man, I was burnt out, or I got like really sick and like had the flu and had the cold 2 weeks before the competition. It's like, yeah, that's not a coincidence, brother. Like that's because you're overtraining. You know what I mean? And you have to kind of like, that has to sort of happen in order for you to find where that line is and start to like listen to the little whispers and the hints that it's coming, and then make a quick correction in your course before it gets worse. And like some of those things you just have to experience, whereas there are certain things where you might go like, hey, like you don't need to max out your snatch 3 times a week for it to get better. Like there's other ways to improve it. Like that's a little more like knowledge that can be crystallized, and you never have to do the dumb thing again. But there are certain things, it's like, you need to go out too hot in a workout and realize you should have paced it. Like you have to do that on your own until you know what to do. It's just inevitable with every athlete in the sport. But I think there are things that I've learned that, and every athlete's learned that's done it long enough, that they're like, oh, I can pass this on, and they don't have to make that mistake, right?
Have you ever trained with a training partner, like say recently? in the last few years, like, or do you always train on your own?
Not in the sense of like the Dan Bailey, Rich Froning training partner kind of relationship. Like I have people that train with me at times, like whether it's a go train with some strongman or a power lifter, or there's some triathletes that I'll sometimes train with and stuff like that. And then there's a female here, Megan Sears. She qualified for her first semi this year. She's only I keep forgetting how old she's, 20. And so her coach is a good friend of mine. And so we trained quite a bit together leading up to semis, because we did all the quarterfinal workouts in the same gym, kind of like I went and then she went, set it up and stuff. And then, so we trained together like, I don't know, once a week or that sort of thing. But it wasn't like we weren't doing the same thing. We weren't racing each other.
Yeah.
She'd have her program, I'd have mine. And you'd be like, oh, let's, like when I did that heavy sled pull thing that I talked about with Christine, she was there that day. I'm like, we're doing this. Like, we're both doing this. And so, she maxed out and then I maxed out. And we're like, all right, good. We learned some stuff. And it's funny. I told her, I was like, that 30 minutes of work we just did there is probably going to give you more points, hopefully, than if you'd put an extra, 20 pounds on your back squat this year. You can work all year to put 20, 30 pounds on a lift that you're like bad in, or go from 15 unbroken ring muscle ups to 19, which takes like a lot of work. Or when a workout's announced, like figuring out how to pull that sled is going to probably get you more points. So there's this funny it's interesting how that stuff works out.
Do you use sunbeds?
Do I what?
Do you use sunbeds, like tanning beds?
Oh no, why?
You were like, during West, I was like, is he jaundiced? It's like he looks like so super tanned, and I was like, when did it get sunny in Canada? Like, what time of year? Because I was like, he is bronzed, like properly bronzed.
I feel like I still look pretty pale. No, but it's been sunny here. I mean, it's been hotter here than it has been. It's been hotter and sunnier here than it has been in California.
Wow. Yeah, because the reason I ask is I just looked at my screen and I was like, oh, that's the key. It needs to be dark here outside for me to look like I'm not see-through. And then I was reminded of like how brown you looked in Pasadena. Yeah, that's funny.
No, I got a bit of sun before. Like, yeah, it was hot here. It was like 30, 35 and stuff. So no, I was outside quite a bit because I was expecting it to be hot in California. So I was trying to get outside and trying to get in the sun. Yeah. And then it was just kind of May gray is what they call it. So it's just a little like overcast the whole
time. Future Brent, then, have you, and I'm not going to ask you like, oh, are you retiring? Because I'd be absolutely fucking terrified to say yes at some point if I keep asking that. Have you thought about, like, because obviously you have Train Your Weakness, you have the Professor Project. Have you thought about like what you're going to do in the eventuality that you do like stop competing as elite individual? Have you thought, like, because obviously we have these kind of teams forming, is that something that maybe you'd be like, oh, that could be a bit of fun? Or have you thought about like, oh, would I like to keep going and do masters? Or have you thought about like, would I like to just go out on a high, stop, and then like coach elite people one-on-one? Or do I want to do the kind of gen pop, like helping a broad array of people get better?
Man, that's a great question. The broad and the specific is an interesting, is quite frankly the interesting way of putting it. Listening to some podcast with, who was it? Like James Clear. He wrote Atomic Habits, and he's like, oh, you write a book like that, and you have a small impact in potentially like 100,000 or 1 million people's lives, or you're like a doctor and you have a larger impact on, maybe 1,000 people or 100 people. So that's kind of the balance you have with being like a coach in, let's say, CrossFit. Right. I don't really know, as far as competing, it's kind of every year is 1 year at a time. Like it's kind of always been that, where even after, I think it was like 2016, my wife and I were talking about it and we're like, yeah, like at least one more year. And then we'll see, definitely 2017 CrossFit Games, like make a push for that. And then I don't know, we'll see. And it's just been like that every year. It's kind of been a year and a half kind of in the future. So where it's like, well, so right now my answer would be, well, definitely compete at the CrossFit Games this year, 2023. Definitely make a run, compete 2024. Like, I think I've still got, plenty of gas in the tank for that. And then, if I'm just like, you know what, no, I don't want to do that, then I'll maybe just do like 1 million off-season competitions and then just call it a day.
Yeah.
That'll be my like, but I feel like that's just going to kind of keep happening, and I don't quite know what the inflection point will be to stop that 1 year at a time thing. It'll probably be a combination of things. Yeah, I don't really have an intention of doing team. I don't really have a desire or intention for doing masters. It's not to say neither of those things wouldn't happen, but it's not really it's not really on my radar. There's a lot of other things that would interest me more. And yeah, it's something, honestly, I don't put a lot of thought into on a daily basis, because it's like obviously training, family, PFA stuff. It's train your weakness, professor project, and that all those things combined keep me pretty busy on a daily basis. So it's a little hard to like think past that, which is kind of, I don't think it's a huge issue, because it's always how it's been. I mean, I don't think I've ever had a 5-year plan that came true. So
yeah, I think. Well, I don't know. I kind of think those like prolonged plans are nuts to me. Like it's like, you know, I'm sure you'd be the same if someone said to you like 2 years ago, what do you want to do in 2 years' time? And then you saw yourself sitting here now on this show, you'd be like, oh, I never thought that would happen. And here we are.
What a failure. Yeah.
What went wrong? What went wrong?
I think as long, like, my opinion on that is, I think you should you should be doing things on a daily basis that are clearly working towards like a future. But I mean, I know all of my like 5-10 year plans have never really come true, because you know, I mean, like, look at this, right? Like, the job I have now was never the plan. It was like, I want to be an accountant, I want to own a business. Like, those were kind of the things. But then this just continually kind of was like pushing itself into my face, like, hey, you should probably compete in CrossFit full time. Like, that makes, you know, financial sense, and you're enjoying it, and it's the best opportunity. And, you know, I think it sort of happened. You know, I didn't really force it. And I think that's more or less like, you talk to a lot of people that, oh, I had a degree in this, and, you know, now I'm whatever. Like, it's just, things change, right? And it's more just about like, you know, making good decisions and marketing, and not marketing. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. But I think the interview's winding down. I think it's winding down. But yeah, I don't really have a specific, you know, master plan. I do want to, whether it's the PFA or something else, like, I do want to try to leave the sport better than I found it. It's kind of like, it's definitely something that I'm very passionate about, that I feel like in some ways frustration's at an all-time high amongst a lot of athletes I've spoken with, and it's kind of like we got to figure this out. You know what I mean? Like, we got to, like, come on, like, there's got to be a way we can make this better and fix these things that keep happening. And I feel that way. And I'm trying. The PFA is the vehicle that I think makes the most sense for that to happen. But it's not something I intend to, you know, give up on anytime soon, is trying to find a way to just like make the sport better. And I'm not sure that that's, you know, in doing that, I don't really know exactly how that's going to formulate itself over the next few years, but I want to leave it better than I found it. And I feel like it hasn't gotten that much better in the last 11 years. Right.
There's Lucy Campbell is piling on pressure, saying there's lots of good athletes in Europe this again.
Yeah, no. And that's what I heard in East. Right. Yeah, it's like, you know, and so I'm a little bit, I'm trying to cash in on that frustration a little bit, and like try to provide a ray of hope, quite frankly. You know, it's like, hey, you know, if the best athletes and athletes in general like band together under like specific common goals and a process, then I think that's how you achieve things. But if that doesn't work, I'll try something else. But to me right now, that makes the most sense, is having athletes like, you know, agree like, hey, this is specifically what we want to see and what we don't want to see, and here's why. And then find a way as a group to make that happen. Like, that's something I'm like really passionate about. And I don't necessarily think that's going to be like my main source of income when I'm done competing, but like, I'm happy to do it like I am now, for free, and even to my own expense at times. I'm happy to do it because it's something I'm really passionate about, and I want to see it.
Yeah, well, I think, like Lucy said there, she told everyone that was
complaining. Yeah, Lucy and I have had some good conversations. Yeah.
It's kind of like knocking on people's door and saying, would you like to hear about our Lord and Savior? It's like, would you like to hear about the PFA when someone's having a really bad day at a competition? Well, listen, I'll let you go. Thanks. I really appreciate you coming back on. It's been great to catch up. And also, like, you gave me one of my non-family based highlights of the last 12 months was carrying your bag back to your RV at Waterloo. That was a very nice moment for me. But thanks for coming back on. Best of luck with your season and everything. I hope everything goes great, and we'll see you in Madison.
Happy 300.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great.
This is the 300th episode. Like the 300 Spartans that defended the world from tyranny. Yeah. This podcast defends your brain cells from maturing.
Wow. I'll just put that. I'll just edit out the 300. I'll put that at the start of every episode from now on.
Yeah, make it into like the